The Austrian Grand Prix is over and F1 is already moving on to the next race, which could be the most important race of the year, as F1 moves on to Silverstone for the British Grand Prix, and that means that once again it is time for my preview and predictions. This is a series where I'll be previewing, and then at the end of the video I'll be giving out my early predictions for the upcoming Grand Prix. Now let's get to the video. As usual, I'll be talking about the likes of Ferrari, Aston Martin, Mercedes and Red Bull a little bit later on, so stick around for that. So why is the British Grand Prix one of the most important races of the year? Well, one of the reasons is that Mercedes and Aston Martin are due to bring major upgrades to their car in order to try and close the gap to the mighty Red Bull team. But another reason is because Pirelli are due to introduce a brand new structure for their tyres, and this structure could change the races altogether, as the tyre is set to be a stronger construction to try and reduce the potential issue for punctures as the cars continue to get faster and faster. This construction change could alter how the cars perform on the tyres, and we may see a slight change in the order due to a team maybe not being able to handle the new tyres as well as they could have on the older constructions. This adds an element of the unknown to a race which typically is a fan favourite, as Silverstone often provides excellent racing. The circuit is not typically the easiest track for overtaking, but the fast flowing nature really plays into the hands of the new cars, and that means that we can see some great racing as the cars are able to follow fairly closely. The circuit features some of the most iconic corners on the entire F1 calendar, such as the run from Copse, through Maggots, Beckett's, Chapel, down the Hanger Straight and into Stowe Corner before the Vale Chicane. The drivers typically overtake into Stowe or into Brooklands, and last year we saw some excellent racing between Ferrari, Red Bull, Mercedes and even the McLaren of Lando Norris. Due to the high-speed nature of the Silverstone circuit, Pirelli will be taking the C1, C2 and C3 compound of tyres, which are the hardest tyres in the Pirelli range. With this, we saw a total of 45 pit stops last year, as the majority of teams opted to do a two-stop strategy, but the race would have been a one-stop had it not been for a late race safety car. The reason it would have been a one-stop is due to the high pit stop time loss at Silverstone, and I expect that this year the race will be a one-stop as always, but it will be a borderline 1 and 2 stops. Sometimes it is a one-stop, but there can be a risk of punctures, but of course with the new construction it may be a bit safer of a one-stop strategy. This one stop does lead to less overtakes, despite the racing being rather good at Silverstone, and last year was no exception, as on track there was a total of 31 on-track overtakes. To help with overtaking, Silverstone features two DRS zones. The first DRS zone is down the Wellington Straight into Brooklands and Luffield, and the second DRS zone is on the exit of Chapel, down the Hanger Straight into Stowe Corner. These two corners are relatively fast, meaning that it is not a heavy braking zone into these corners, which is why overtaking can be fairly tricky at this circuit, but when they do overtake around the circuit, it does tend to look pretty spectacular. Silverstone is a circuit that will suit the teams that are very strong when it comes to high-speed downforce. Some teams tend to run lower downforce than you might expect around a circuit like this, and the reason they do that is due to the amount of time that the drivers spend at full throttle as the cars are constantly at high speed. Last year's pole position lap time was a 1:40.983 by Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari, but that was during a wet qualifying session, and the fastest lap in the main Grand Prix was a 1:30.510 by Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes, which was set on the final lap of the race. I have a feeling that the pole position lap time will almost certainly be beaten, provided qualifying is dry, but the fastest lap time was set on the final lap of the race, meaning that to beat it, it will probably require a driver boxing on the penultimate lap of the race, but due to the massive time loss in the pit lane, that will be unlikely to happen unless the driver has over a 30-second gap to the car behind them, like what we saw with Verstappen last time out at the Red Bull Ring, and also Perez in Montreal. I just want to say, if you are enjoying the video, I'll greatly appreciate it if you hit the like button and subscribe for more F1 content. Now, let's get back to the video and let's get to the top 4 teams, and let's start with Ferrari. For Ferrari, the Austrian Grand Prix was looking like it will be their strongest race of the year, with Charles Leclerc starting in 2nd place and Carlos Sainz starting all the way up in 3rd place on the grid. And for the team, it was a mighty strong race, as for the first time since Miami, we had a different driver lead the race over than Max Verstappen, and that was the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc. In Austria, Ferrari were clearly the 2nd fastest team, as the circuit suited their car nicely. The team also brought a revised package to the Austrian Grand Prix, and it seems like those upgrades have helped sort out some of the issues with tyre degradation. However, at Silverstone, Pirelli will be bringing the hardest spec of tyres, and so far this year, Ferrari have struggled when on the hardest spec of tyres, so it will be interesting to see if the new package will help solve some of their issues on those tyres. The circuit characteristics of the track is also more in line with Barcelona, and we saw in the race, Ferrari were struggling a little bit more when it came to race pace at Circuit de Catalunya. It will be interesting to see if the modified car will help them to fight a little bit harder, and if they are actually better on their tyres when it comes to higher speed circuits. Also, in terms of aerodynamic efficiency, Silverstone should be a good circuit that suits their car, but I am very interested to see if they can get on top of the tyres at a high speed circuit, as they will be front tyre limited at Silverstone, whereas at Austria and also Montreal, they were rear tyre limited. For Aston Martin, the Austrian Grand Prix was a difficult race, as Alonso finished down in P6 and on pure pace was beaten by the McLaren of Lando Norris, and Lance Stroll finished in 10th place. For Fernando, he had good race pace, and in terms of tyre wear, he was strong as the stints wore on, but the overall pace of the Aston was a little bit behind what we have come to expect from them. For Alonso though, he did perform better and had much better pace than the Mercedes, which you can see when we look at the lap times for the race for Fernando Alonso and the 2 Mercedes drivers. Going into Silverstone, Aston Martin are expected to bring a big upgrade, and I believe they will need this upgrade to be able to stay in the fight, as based on their current setup, Silverstone could be a tricky weekend, and I feel they may be the 4th fastest team at this circuit. The upgrade could change all of that, of course, but back in Spain, they did struggle with pace, similarly to Ferrari. But with Ferrari seemingly moving forward, we could still yet see Aston Martin struggle and continue to slowly fall backwards as the bigger teams continue to catch up and move forward with their upgrades. But like I said, we still need to wait and see what their upgrades hold. For Mercedes, the Austrian Grand Prix was a difficult race, as Lewis Hamilton spent the vast majority of the race complaining about receiving track limits penalty and feeling hard done by, as others were not receiving the same treatment in his eyes. And George Russell had a very off weekend, being out in Q2 and in the race finishing all the way down in 8th, albeit, of course, he was only 1 place behind his teammate Lewis Hamilton. The British Grand Prix, though, should be a much better race for the team, as Mercedes tend to struggle at Austria, but go much better at the British Grand Prix. Last year, it was one of their strongest races, and given they were very strong in Barcelona, and they were by far the team that were closest to Red Bull, I believe that they will be very strong again this weekend. The team, much like Aston Martin, are set to bring a large upgrade to the track, and if the upgrade works like they are expecting, then I believe it may be possible for the Silver Arrows to have both cars on the podium if one of the Red Bulls has a mistake during qualifying, which, we've come to somewhat expect. For Red Bull, it was another strong race for the team as Max Verstappen took another victory. But this victory came with Verstappen not actually leading every lap of the race, which has become a bit of a rarity as he had to pass both Ferraris on track. Although that was more down to Ferrari pitting under the VSC and Max staying out. When you look at the lap times of Verstappen to Leclerc, it becomes painfully clear just how much of an edge Verstappen has over the field. The British Grand Prix should be another dominant weekend for the Red Bull team, and I fear the race result might be a very easily Red Bull 1-2, provided Perez can for once get his qualifying position sorted out. The competition though might keep trying, but they still struggle to find a way to close the gap to the mighty Red Bull team. So with that in mind then, what are my early predictions for the British Grand Prix? Well, for pole position, I am going to stick with the boring answer and say Max Verstappen will score pole position in the Red Bull, but what about the main Grand Prix? Well, in the main race, I think it will be Charles Leclerc who finishes in 5th place, P4 will be George Russell, P3 will be Sergio Perez, P2 will be Lewis Hamilton, and Max Verstappen will win the British Grand Prix, and I think the top midfield driver will be Lando Norris, as the new McLaren does look like a vast improvement over the previous car. But that is what I think. The question is though, what do you guys think will happen? Down below in the comment section, let me know. And as always, comment, leave a like, and subscribe for more F1 content. Thank you all so much for watching.